Ready.
AVWeek.
Performing. Scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AVWeek. AVWeek.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. Welcome. Good afternoon. If you're watching from the West Coast, good late morning to you. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us. With us this week is my buddy, my pal, the left side of my brain. I think you're still at the left side of my brain. George Chucker, engineering coordinator for World Stage and all-around producer extraordinaire for AVNation. How are you, sir?
All right, good afternoon from the East Coast.
And I told George this off the air. This is my favorite background that he's actually at World Stage, and so it looks like he actually does a job for a living as opposed to mine. So also with us is Frank White. Frank is the senior partner at StayTuned and speaking of the West Coast, he is on the West Coast. So how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And last but not least, a guy that I've followed for a number of years on Twitter. And I've never actually talked to him in person, so this is a treat for me. Mr. Paul Konikowski from PK
Thank you.
Audiovisuals. How are you, sir?
Also on the West Coast, doing well, north of San Francisco. So.
Oh, very good. You're around our buddy Mr. Fregosa and Mr. Strago. So.
Yep, very good. Yep. Yeah. And Johnny Moda too. He's very close.
And Johnny
to me.
Moda.
Mr. Moda, yes.
Yes, cannot forget about Johnny. We talked about him last.
Has he been a guest on here yet?
A couple times early on. Actually, Johnny was one of the episodes we did early on. He didn't coin the phrase. He used the Monty Python "Bring Out Your Dead." When we were talking about years ago, Crestron had a turn-in program where they allowed you to return or basically bring in used analog gear for digital gear, and it's one of those episodes you don't forget. So. All of our podcasts brought to you by fine folks at Middle Atlantic Products. We will talk to them about them in a couple minutes, but yes, thank you so much to Middle Atlantic Products. All right, first up, from our buddies over at CE Pro. This is from Julie Jacobson, and it caught my eye simply because of, honestly, it's because of the Internet of Things and all the different control stuff that has been on my brain, at least lately. And the fact that RTI is getting two-way IP control with Apple TVs. Now, let me say that again. The Apple TV can be controlled through IP by RTI. Interesting how they did it. Interesting the fact that they did it. George, real quickly, and we'll get Paul and Frank. What does this mean for people like AMX and Crestron and Control for the possibilities of breaking into a let's say it, a system that has up until this point been very difficult to crack into.
And very difficult to say the least. I think you're putting a sugar coating on that.
I'm trying to.
Yeah, well, again, they did say it was cracked. Actually, was the word.
Cracked, not hacked.
And the person being quoted actually did say that it was reverse engineered. These are two bad phrases for me. That while we all do it, somebody who's doing it for profit and as a company, that's a seriously. There's quandaries there.
Okay, real quickly, why is that?
Well, because every item that you ever get from software or when you license it or say, yes, I agree, usually says you will not reverse engineer in whole or part any concept of it. Any company does it, from the big manufacturers in our industry to consumer electronics. It's in there somewhere when you say, yes, you will not reverse engineer it in any part or whole, blah, 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 via any implement of whatever. Then that's part of the problem, is that Apple's been so bad about saying, yes, we want to integrate with you, or we want this to be part of our world, that they haven't really cared. It's IR, it's fine, it's simple, go away. And I can see their point, because they don't want to be held responsible in some ways for something going bad. A coder doing it wrong, or somewhere down the line when they make a firmware change, it's an issue. And in point of that, there's a historic precedent for it with their iPods. When Apple laid out their new Nanos, it was when they were the big sort of squarish-looking things, or rectangular-looking things, they put out a whole new of neon colors. What they did not tell any of their partners in software was that when they put out the neon colors, they changed not only the pin configuration, but some of the software hooks. Ergo, anything that worked previously when you got the new one, or updated your firmware to the older version, none of it worked. whether it was Crestron, AMX, or any of the other systems out there. They also didn't work in Hummer and Cadillacs and Mercedes. So they've had a long history of this, and I'm not so sure how beneficial over the long run it will be for them. It's great. I want to see more of it, but...
Okay. Frank, does George have a point here with the I guess the downside or the backlash of reverse engineering, or is this one of those things where they hacked it, or cracked it, however you want to say it, tomato, but is that just another way for guys like Control 4 and RTI and people like that to get into a system that is ubiquitous, is rather popular, and their customers are asking for it, so they're saying, hey, you know what, look, here's the deal, we could do it, this is just kind of how we have to do it. Is there a bad side to that?
Well, there's well, first of all, from the technician part of me is I'm very intrigued on that they actually got to do it.
Yeah.
As somebody in an integration role, I don't know that I would, unless you have a really good understanding of the complete environment and architecture and ecosystem that they have, could you install that, and will it bridge into whatever updates they send? Because as we all love and live with our Apple TVs, okay, that firmware gets updated every 60 days or so, and is this hack or crack or however you're putting this, it's obviously compromised the intentions of Apple. I imagine that if Apple sees a way to potentially monetize something in their best interest, I imagine that they'd have a discussion, but I don't know that it works that way.
But here's the thing with they and this is our own little navel gazing for a second. It seems like that they would have had that conversation by now, doesn't it?
It sure does. I mean, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Well,
we're not
one conversation they had this week was with IBM, so it seems like Apple is getting a little bit more open to mixing with other people. I don't know if you guys heard that news at all. It's outside of AV land, and I don't know if it's as relevant, but Apple and IBM announced a new partnership this week where they're going after enterprise, because Apple's been so good at consumer and so good at keeping things simple, and IBM's so good at enterprise and not so simple. And so there's very little overlap between the companies, and they created this partnership earlier this week, they announced, where they're going after enterprise applications, apps, so you can have what everybody's been wanting for since the iPad came out, a truly enterprise level iPad, enterprise level iPhone, things like that. So I think traditionally the Apple ecosystem has been very hard to crack, very close-minded. They don't want to work with anybody, but I feel like maybe the tide is turning. Maybe they are realizing that it's time to go a bit bigger, and maybe they do need to play well with others. So I agree with the point about it being legal or not legal. I mean, I would be scared to write the article even. I would tell Julie to keep this on the down low. But because I mean, there's been plenty of hacks in our industry for years. People were hacking HDMI before it should have been hacked, and it's when it gets public is that when the legal stuff comes out. But I do think that we're at a tipping point, because Apple is going from that consumer level or graphic designer, that single person working alone or working in a small team, and it wants to get up to that Dell level, up to the server level, and IBM's there, and IBM obviously has no way to get back to the consumers. They've sort of lost the consumers at this point. So, I think to me that was bigger news. Right. I didn't. RTI is a great little company. The other thing that brings us to mind is, well, why wouldn't somebody just buy RTI? Like, why wouldn't Apple or one of these other companies just pick them up? Apple has enough cash around that they could just simply probably buy out RTI.
Cisco.
My thing is that even if 100% of the integration companies moved from Roku and some of the others, and they focused exclusively on the integration of IP television through an Apple TV box, are we going to even move the needle for content for them?
Yeah.
I don't think we represent enough of an interest at $100 a pop to really make move that needle for them very much.
No, and that's a valid point. The fact that and I think that's also probably why Apple hasn't spent a whole lot of time.
Right.
Tim Cook did say recently that it was no longer a hobby, right? It's a very profitable hobby for them still because they haven't done a whole lot of development.
But the integration portion of their business has got to be, single digits or maybe less. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, at best, we're not even on their radar, right? But that's true. I mean, that's true for most of AV. I don't mean to generalize your statement at all, Frank. It's definitely more specific to Apple, but we've been out of off the radar for quite a while. We've been tossed aside, and so I believe that what will be the inroads will be the IT sector. Will be that sort of IT sector and pulling it all together. I think as they move into this space, this enterprise level space, we're going to start seeing a lot more digital signage type applications,
right.
Content sharing, cloud-based enterprise stuff that is secure.
I think for Apple, there's a lot more headroom. They don't have to sell it to us for $100. Because we're going to integrate it and attach a lot more value to it as it moves through the channel. And so, look at this: is that for a long time, we as an industry have kind of had a chip on our shoulders in that Apple's much more important to us than we are to them.
Well, and let's be honest, that's going to be the way it is for a while.
Right.
Because yes, we're not a small industry, but they are not. Their phone business, is bigger than us. Is bigger than the AV industry.
Right.
If I did the math in my head and how many handsets they actually sell on a yearly basis. This is the same conversation that happened when AMX and Harman got together, and that inevitably led to who else is on the block, either literally or who could be, and you start looking at the cost of some of these companies, and not that I have $500 million lying around, but if I did, I could pick up a good portion of the AV manufacturers in the industry.
Right.
And in a good portion of the integrators in this industry with $500 million. And Apple has multiples of that just in cash reserves right now.
Right.
Alrighty. Again, another not that CE Pro needs our help, but it was another interesting article. So we'll stay with them for a second. And the reason for that is honestly this is Thread. If you're not familiar with what Thread is, real quickly, Paul, do you have a Nest in your house?
No, I do not. I'm familiar with the product, but I do not.
George, do you?
No, I have a Crestron wireless thermostat.
Ooh, even better. Frank?
I do not. I am very familiar with it.
All right, well, I have a Nest. That's why I'm asking. So one out of the four. Our unscientific study says 25%. Right there. 25% of the company. I shouldn't say that. But so Nest is the fancy schmancy, Apple-esque thermostat, and there are other things that are being threaded, pun intended, because this is a new, let's call it a standard or a protocol. And yes, I know the wonderful thing about standards is that there are so many of them, but the thing that makes this one interesting is the fact that Nest is involved, and they are the golden child right now of home automation type things or home connected things. And the fact that they've got these other products honestly kind of connected together, and it's almost like their own little intranet, right, of talking to each other and this, that, and the other. Frank, when it comes to getting another standard up, and I hate using that term, and I hesitate even using the term protocol, but getting that in place for integrators, right, for residential integrators, to be able to talk to one device and connecting multiples at the same time, how important is it for all these things to be able to are on the same wavelength or on the same protocol?
Well, I think right now, in order to get cross-platform operability, it takes an enormous amount of effort by skilled labor to program stuff that are pretty sophisticated. If we can get subsystems that talk together, that automatically populate, and it reduces the amount of code writing time, I think that is absolutely the best thing. Right now, the least predictable portion of our industry is integration labor at the programming code level. And so it's very, very difficult when I go out to a client and tell them what their system can do. In the back of all of our minds is, can my programmers link all of that stuff together and then come out of it with a predictable amount of investment in the labor to be able to execute on that. And so I think that having some kind, standard may not be the right word, but if we can get interoperability where I know that I can get that in a reliable, stable fashion, it'll bridge across, software and firmware updates, and somebody comes in and trades out, in this case it's a fan or a thermostat, and it's still going to operate in that environment. I don't have to throw a huge amount of labor on that truck roll to get out there and make that stuff work for the client. It'll be a much more predictable labor environment if we get that.
Real quickly, I don't want to digress here, but in my full-time job, I manage an independent programming house. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's so difficult to get such a consistent number when it comes to good quality programming? Is it because people are afraid of making a mistake, and so they put so much margin in their quote, or do you just simply the fact that these systems vary from job to job, and you simply can't just type in a set of criteria and have some computer program spit out, oh, this will take X amount of hours?
I think that has to do a lot with who's quoting. I know I used to work for HB Communications, and we had a pretty good set of rules to quote guidelines, but the programmer always had to be engaged. The programmer was supposed to sign off on the hours. The engineer was supposed to help estimate the hours before the proposal went off, and he had to sign out on it, and then the programmer would sign off on it, and it's all who's quoting. The programmer, I believe, is always going to want more hours because they may be trying to make up for hours that they spent on another job. They may also know that the first time through the touch panel probably won't be the last through the layouts, and so it may depend on the client and how picky the client is, how many changes they want. This is also going to tie into I was actually thinking about bringing up the programming costs when we're going to talk a little bit later about outsourcing and how that might actually help standardize. But I've seen. I think the best case scenario is where the programmer estimates it, but I've also seen the programmer really take advantage of that situation. Let me give you an example. Without naming names, a very certain high-end consultant firm nationwide, if you bid on their job, they basically tell you who has to be the programmer.
Wow.
They say this guy, it's a guy, he claims he's more than one person, but this guy needs to be our programmer, and all the bidders have to go to him and get the price. So that guy can name his price, and it comes out to the tune of $20,000 a job, sometimes. And okay, well, he's the best, and they're specifying the programmer, and great, we have our own programmers in-house. This is when I used to do integration. But we'll use your programmer, and for that $20,000, the guy rolled in to our shop. He was supposed to come in and do some pre-programming. He didn't have anything ready. Like, he literally walked in, pulled out an old file that he used on the last project for the same consultant, and started working right in our conference room. And I was just blown away that we had to pay him, $20,000 or $30,000 to program a law firm. And yet absolutely had no ability to price it out. The client had to eat it. I'm sure he gave the same price to all the bidders, and it just seemed absolutely ridiculous, the price that he gave. And then when it came, and he was very unprofessional. He was working on other jobs while he was on our project, while he was in our building, and I don't know. I just felt it was kind of a cheap shot. I felt it was sort of the programming industry taking advantage of the situation. I'm sure he and the consultant had worked out some sort of deal where the consultant basically said, you do everything I tell you to do and I'll make sure you get paid for it. It's that sort of, I think it's those sort of things that make people really question the programming and well, how hard can it be? And as we get into these simpler systems, these Nest and apps that people can program by themselves, or hey, I can build my own web page, that programming expertise sort of goes away in the client eyes, and they really do look at that line and say, what's with this programming line? Why do I got to pay so much in programming? And you and I both know it takes 3 trips to the site to redo the touch panel, and 3 other things because they changed their mind 3 times. But it's much easier, I feel, to bury the cost into the equipment and not give a line for programming than it is to sell the idea of programming to a client. I think it's almost impossible.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, so but there's a second environment too that goes beyond the programmers, is that you're going to get buried or you're neck deep or elbows deep into this project, and then the client says, well, we've got this Vizio set out in the garage, or we've got this Panasonic display in the lobby, we want that incorporated. You go through your data sets, you've got to go through and vet all of the commands on that, on that display. And how do you put a charge for that, because you don't have any experience with it, but the client rightfully wants to know up front what the price is to do that. And inside, when we all sit next to each other at the bar at these trade shows and stuff, we like to talk about time and materials. But I'll tell you this, is that buyers today are very wary. They want to have a hard target on what this is going to cost. And so as an integrator and as a professional and as a buyer, just somebody that lives in this world, I want to have a limit on what that's going to cost. I want to know what that's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so by going to those standards, we're going to get that linearized in a better fashion. Will it ever get there? I don't know, but I think it would help.
George,
yeah, I think.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, George.
Where do you think that the whole thread thing? How is that going to impact folks like our buddy Steve Greenblatt and Mark Rebecca and me, these independent programming houses where you've got integrators who don't necessarily have certified programmers, but they have people who've got some decent chops, and you start giving them tools like this, and it's like, oh, you know what, we can do this. We don't have to, we don't have to become AMX certified all the way. We've got these tools, or Crestron certified all the way. We've got these tools, and we can just pop in and make everything work because of these different protocols.
Well, I think Frank pointed it out very early on, which is interoperability.
Okay.
If you don't have that hub, the article goes at lengths, Julie, I think it was Julie who wrote this one, saying that, you didn't need a hub. This is the sort of the distributed versus centralized model. What's better? The mesh network over several objects or via a central hub? What happens when it breaks down? How many things do you have to fix when you have to get it fixed, right? It's a continuing debate, and they both are valid, but you have to have that interoperability or that main piece of software that can react to it, and that's the inclusive. We can make 1,000 different things like Nest and Thread and others that say, yes, I can reach out to you and do something, but can you get the information back, and can you parse that information to something that's usable and reliable and actually human? When I dim the lights, do I want something to happen? That kind of stuff. So therein, I think, lies that quandary. Are there tools out there that make some of that simpler and allow you to use Boolean logic, is basically what we're talking about, to make those decisions? Yes. But my concern, as eager as I am to have something like this in my house, and like, oh, that's kind of cool, I'll play with it, is the example of, say, CEC. Bring it up a lot. You have this article states there are thousands of pieces of gear with the 6 WAN LAN or the 802.15.4 protocol built in, and it's ready to go. And yes, but no. It doesn't have all the features. It doesn't talk about these things. It can't do all the same standard sets. Will they make a standard? Again, I go back to CEC or the 1,000 non-years of us not having even the same gears types, let alone the same code and protocols. So I see it as a possibility, but history has shown us that it probably won't work out that way. It'll be something in the middle.
Well, and whenever we start talking about standards, you always bring up, the DB9 and 232, and which pin is hot. What do you ask?
And which, even for the old timers here, which was female and which was male?
Yeah.
How the manufacturer decided they were DC or DTE.
I used to order. When I was an engineer, I used to order both because even
exactly.
if no matter what the manual said, half the time it was wrong, and it was cheaper for me to order both connectors and have the installer keep whichever one he or she didn't need. But you're absolutely right about interoperability and calling it a standard. It kind of reminds me of WISA. Have you guys talked about WISA much? I've worked with them over the last couple of years on and off, CDS shows and otherwise, and and we'll say we're building a new standard, but in reality it's not a standard. We're not a standards organization. It was really a, an industry alliance. But that interoperability between brands is what really appealed to the consumer. The idea that the consumer can have a Sharp television, clipped speakers, some other kind of subwoofer, and they all work together seamlessly, quote unquote, was what's sold to the consumer, which is exactly what we're doing. We're integrating different types of gear, unless you're a full Crestron system or something. So the hard part here, I think, is getting the people on board, and that's one thing we struggled with WISA, but that was one of my initial goals when I was brought on with them, was to get people on board, get the bandwagon rolling. Because guess what? If you only have one company on board, there's no interoperability, right? So getting everyone to jump into the boat, and they have Nest, big ass fans, and Yale Security, which are all great for certain applications. I guess that fits sort of education pretty well, because you have a lot of those. I don't know if you guys are familiar with big ass fans. They they put them out here in the cafeterias and stuff like that. Yale Security.
I have a 100,000 square foot facility I am in, and there are about 12 of them. Yes.
Right. So
like
I can totally see it I can completely see it working in security and home, environment control. Is this gonna be, something that we do presentations through, or ties into our system? That I think that might be a stretch. Samsung is the one caveat there, but I don't, it will see. I know Samsung also tends to dip their toe into things and then kind of see how it moves, and see what the market says. So I don't know. I think the challenge is going to be for them is to sort of say, okay, we're all in this, and instead of doing something else. Nest is also bought by Google. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, that may help. That may actually help, because that actually has some big brother behind it, and it takes us out of this AV land and into the big eye of the media.
Yeah, back into IT, honestly.
But getting our manufacturers to pull in the same direction is very difficult. You look at the gestation length of an integration project from the initial contact until the final check, and in many instances this is measured in 15, 18 months. Mm-hmm. And so if I start speccing something that has that interoperability standard from a big manufacturer like, say, JVC or Sony, there could be 3 or 4 product cycles before I'm actually going to place a purchase order for that 50-inch panel or whatever it is. And so there could be, and they're sitting there buying into it now. That product's going to come out in 4 or 5 months. If they don't see a lot of commercial success, they're going to sit there quickly. They're going to make a business decision saying we're not putting effort into that anymore. It's a really difficult arena to play in.
There has to be money there. I mean, there has to be. They have to want to get into that space. They have to see this. They've hit their limit, and it would make beneficial for them to.
Makes economic sense.
Getting back to the Weiss idea, you have a number of speaker manufacturers who don't know how to create televisions. So you can't expect a Polk Audio or a Klipsch to start making televisions. But of course, they want speakers that talk to televisions wirelessly. So it's in their best interest to team up with someone who knows how to make a television. So I think it's going to be when they realize that they either have to be in or they're not. You're either in or you're not. It'll be the driving force. It'll be really interesting to see who jumps on this board. And again, if someone just buys, if Google just starts buying up these companies and just calls it something else.
Calls it Google Thread.
Right. We'll call it G-Thread.
Yeah.
Like
right,
G-String. It's sort of like G-String. We'll call it G-String.
Good Lord. Good night. Last week's title was bad enough. Now we've got another one. Yeah.
I'm going to write that one down.
That G-String. All right. Take a break, guys. Get something to drink. Whoever's phone is ringing, answer it. George, tell your wife I said hi, if that's her. We're going to take a quick break. Talk to her about our buddies over at Mid-Atlantic. Mid-Atlantic Products. They have signed up and been very nice. Our first sponsor, this is brought to you by their new C5 series credenzas and the new FlexView display solutions. If you did not get a chance to go by their booth at Infocom, or if you didn't go to Infocom, go by the website, middleatlantic.com. They have this product and a ton of other stuff. They've got a whole chat feature that allows you to connect with customer service and technical support from 8 in the morning until 8 at night Eastern. So both Paul and Frank, if you guys are doing a job and you're like, holy cow, I don't know what to do here, and it happens to be a Middle Atlantic product, don't call them about, a Nest problem. They won't know what to do. But you can chat with them about pretty much anything Middle Atlantic related. Again, 8 in the morning until 8 at night. But the new credenzas, basically, it's an expansion on their already existing really cool credenzas. The FlexView display solution. If you go to our website or you go to our YouTube page, you'll get to see a video of myself and Becky Villarreal just demonstrating one of these FlexViews. They're really cool. It's a display mount that has wheels and allows you to roll it around from place to place. They have 2 or 3 different models. One of them allows you to actually move the display up and down for either video conferencing or for handicap access or other instances where you would need to move up and down. The other one is kind of built for mobile video conferencing. It's got a giant base. You can put a battery backup and a VTC system in. So yeah, it's some really cool stuff. If you go by the website and check it out, if you would please. MiddleAtlantic.com. Middle Atlantic. What great systems are built on.
That sounds like a good that sounds like a good product for telemedicine. This is a
yes, it would be. Yeah, it would be very much. Yeah. All right, from our buddies over at Commercial Integrator, this caught my eye for a couple different reasons. I've mentioned this before in a couple blog posts, and this and the other. One thing that makes AVNation kind of cool and unique, at least to me, is the fact that all of us are working professionals. My full-time job is I run a independent programming and design consulting firm. So guess what I am? I'm third-party labor, y'all. So this is okay. So this is the white paper is talking about the challenges of third-party labor. I am that third party, right? I'm either you get stuck, or you don't have a programmer, or you don't have a certified programmer.
You're a challenger, right? Oh, did I say that out loud?
What'd you say?
Nothing.
No. So there are issues, right? There are problems with hiring third-party people. Here's where in again, my opinion, my point of view. This is what I do for a living, right, guys? The challenge comes in when you hire the wrong one. When you hire the wrong one. When you hire very nice Stevie, who, yes, he can crack into Raspberry Pi and make it sing like nobody's business, but has no chops and no right getting into an AMX system or nothing to do with a Crestron system or a BIAMP system or a BSS or what have you. That's where you get into trouble. Paul, we'll kick it off with you on here. What are some of the challenges, and then how do you overcome those challenges when it comes to working with third-party labor and third-party people when it comes to integrating systems?
I would say, one of the biggest challenges. Let's take a programmer for instance. Let's say, I hired you or one of your staff, and they did a fantastic job, on this one job. And I said, all right, I want to hire your company again. And well, the person that programmed last time, he or she is on vacation, so we're going to send this new guy. So you don't really know who you're getting, right? Like a lot of times when you're hiring, you don't really know. Whereas if you have that labor in-house, you know who's really good at stuff. Again, I go back to the HB Communications example. There were certain guys that were really, really good at custom things, and other guys that were really good at schools or something like that. So you kind of knew which guys or girls fit the job. Whereas when you're going outsourced, you don't really know what you're going to get. You can't handpick your person. You can't estimate where they're going to be driving from. The good news is that it means standard rates, so that if my client does question, if the jobs go out to bid and they choose a bidder and they do start questioning the labor numbers, we can always compare that to a more national standard. But I would say that's the biggest challenge, is you don't really know what the person has done before you get them. And I don't know if you offer anything like that, Tim, where the the possible client gets to interview the programmer. ahead of time and gets a resume or here's 3 previous projects. It's the other thing is that even if you're handed 3 previous projects, just like any other bid, well, here's our dream staff and look at all the stadiums they've done. When the job gets awarded, a lot of times those guys are off winning another bid while the new guys are the ones that are brought to site. So really knowing who you're getting, I'd say, is the other hard part. The idea of having sort of rental labor goes towards sort of the IATSE model, where each show house, each concert hall doesn't need 50 stagehands every night. This one might need some one night, and these might know. So having the idea that you could freelance around definitely helps. When I was reading the article, I didn't read the entire white paper, I'll admit. One thing I thought of here was Ultrasound and Pro Media. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that company. They're a Bay Area firm, and basically Ultrasound does live touring. They do the big concert tours, and Pro Media is the install half, and it's the same company, and they basically have 2 halves. And what they do is they use their guys to either, their touring guys who aren't touring then become their installers. So if they have a bunch of guys that aren't on the road, I say guys, of course I mean guys and girls. We're predominantly a male industry, but they use those guys to become installers, and they're they have some know-how to rig, and they have some they learn how to solder, but they have a neat model, because if they don't have enough labor, they don't go after the job. If they do have labor, they go after more jobs. In this case, they could actually still go after more bids, even if their main crew is on the road, because they would know, well, we have this reliable outsourced company that we can still bid on and use and have pricing on the wall that I can look at and say, okay, that's what it's going to cost me a guy per day. I think that's the other thing that's a challenge is when you're doing it in-house, you can sort of, you can determine, you can use some newer people on certain jobs. Let's put it that way. Some jobs aren't quite as critical.
Yeah, you've got that, but here's the thing where I'll answer your question directly. You've got the reputation of, whether it's my buddy Steve Greenblatt with Control Concepts, Mark Lavecchia with BMA, and I mentioned those 2 because those are on opposite sides of the country, and little old me, Innovad, in the middle. You've got Pepperdash, you've got other companies as well, specifically talking about programming. You don't know who you're getting, right? You don't know who you're getting. You're going on the reputation of the previous jobs that they're getting, and you're relying on the managers of that company, the primaries in that company, to make sure that you're getting a good quality product. So I guess the bottom line is we went from programming to labor, and labor's a whole other issue too, because there's a company here in the Midwest called United Visual Labor. They do labor, and they're contracted and bonded, and they're union and this, that, and the other, which is all important, especially if you're in the Midwest. I'm not sure about the coast, but in the Midwest, that's an important part too. These are people who are AV professionals that happen to do the installation and the rigging and this, that, and the other. You're relying on that company and the managers of that company, the primaries, to make sure you get a good, decent job. If they think that a journeyman rigger or a journeyman rack builder will do a fine job for you, then that's on them, right? Does that make sense? Where you're hiring Control Concepts, and if Steve Greenblatt says, you know what, yes, this kid is green, right? Yes, he's in Crestron World, he has only been to 201 class, but he's good, right? He'll do a good job for you, and your bottom line doesn't change whether or not that takes that kid 1,000 hours or it takes her 2 hours to program. You're still going to pay the same exact price, which is another nice thing about hiring third parties. Is
that's not totally true though, because
it depends on the contract.
You're taking the cost that I'm paying you. You're not taking the cost of my time dealing with that novice programmer.
Well, that's
true. You're not taking the cost of the client whose project is delayed, who's making you stay late on a Friday because this programmer can't get their act together.
And then that goes back to the primary. So that goes back to that's on the primary, right? That's the person that you have the contract with. If that's happening, then that's not a good relationship. right?
Right, but at that point, at 5 o'clock on Friday night, what are my choices? Like if you send me one of your programmers out to the Bay Area and he's supposed to be done at 5 o'clock on Friday and it's just not working, we don't. He's like, I got to get on a flight, I got to go, or you're gonna have to pay extra. It's on the other person, and yes, I can hold you accountable. Yeah. It still doesn't make the system work. So again, it really the concern I have here is that really knowing who you're getting.
I think there's a difference for perspective here, Tim.
Go ahead.
If you can request that person, then the client and yourself can have a lot more confidence in that person. I've seen way too many companies pull a bait and switch, where they bring their best programmer in to win the bid, and then that programmer goes away. I've seen programmers hired just to win bids. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen.
Go ahead, Frank.
Okay, so first of all, as I said, if we were to look at this strategically, a company has labor that they pay in a linear fashion, but the nature of integration is labor is not demanded linearly. It happens in fits and starts, and so the issue is how do we do that, and at which time do you hire a marketing person? None of us take our own trash to our dump. We outsource that. Right? There's certain things that we're really confident because we're buying that outcome. Do I really care where it's taken and which kind of truck it's taken and the expertise of the guy taking my trash to the dump? I'm buying that outcome, and I think that at least 3 of us on this are independents where we're doing contract work for clients. They're paying us for an outcome, and across probably the 1,100 different engagements that I've had with customers, this really works best when there is a very detailed expectation that the client has. And that detailed expectation, Paul, in your case, could be, okay, this is going to be done, or there's going to be some kind of consequences at 5 o'clock on Friday night. And I know that I go into some kind of a contractor's nightmare of negative financial consequences if I don't meet that time.
Yes.
And then define what a successful outcome is. The issue that we have is that we get these really ambiguous agreements, and you'll be able to have that party Friday night, or look at you're having that big conference, and so that conference room is going to be dialed in with everything from remote learning and high def video exchanges, and that's just not the case. We have to have very detailed agreements, and so if you're out there and watching this as a buyer, really weigh the wisdom of your gut. Do you get along with this person? Do you have access? Do you have the ability to confront them with something very aggressively? For those of us that are in the business of contracting and being that outsourced guy, let's be very specific. If you look at the business of being a contractor, let's say, Paul, your company does at $500,000 a year, so we're kind of a modest-sized integrator. If you work 50 hours a week, you're putting $200 an hour worth of revenue under the bus every hour for every 50 of those hours. Are you going to be able to write your newsletter for that? How much does that newsletter become if you spend 3 hours on it? Or let's say it's a simple, conference room remote that needs to be programmed. Do you really have the $600 or $700 or $800 that you would pay an initial guy to go learn it, and another $200 or $400 to program it, or could you just throw $500 at Paul to go have it programmed correctly? It's worth having those discussions, but I think that we on the supply side, outsource side, need to be very good at discipline at harvesting from the client a very specific outcome that's very detailed. Then you end up with a pretty enjoyable experience across all of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you hit it. You also touched upon something where defining the scope of work, and you touch upon, how, do you do the marketing yourself or do you not? I also do social media marketing for companies,
right.
And a lot of people say I do my own Facebook marketing, but I haven't done it in a long time. And it's like, well, yeah, because you have 500 other things you got to get done this week, and Facebook marketing is the last thing you're going to think of, and there's no return on investment that you can see. If you hire me to do it, it's going to be the first thing I do on Monday. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the first thing I'm going to get to. And so many integrators, because this industry is such a mom and pop industry, except for some of these larger houses, the Diversifieds, the HBs of the world, and I'm sure there's bigger ones in the Midwest. AVI, SBL, obviously Monster. There's so many mom and pops that have been doing everything themselves, that are the type of people that like to do it all themselves and like to learn. I'm the type of person that loves to learn, and even if it takes me all day, it's fun. But I mean, I'm thinking of other past employers, and they were doing the programming themselves. They were doing, the marketing themselves. And it turned out to be very, inefficient. Because their skills were being wasted on smaller things. You're absolutely right, Frank. You shouldn't be taking out your own garbage all the way to the dump unless it's on the way home, like something like that. And so many people...
Oh, you should never be taking your trash to the dump.
Paul, the whole point on
compost
this,
out here. We do composting.
Let's give the listener the tools to be able to understand that. Yeah, you probably could write your own newsletter, or you could probably be an accurate representative, articulated that on Facebook. It's pretty easy to do, but the problem is that it never hits the criticality level for you because you have so many other, your day plan, you have a to-do list, and that lasts to the first time a phone rings, and then off the rails the day goes. And so by outsourcing to somebody who's got the infrastructure to set this up, it'll be only at 80% as good as you do. But I'll tell you what, it's better than zero marketing when you don't do it. Right? And so that's the point of doing that right. The same thing is, look at this, if you've got, all of us have got projects in our skeleton closet where we didn't finish the last 8 or 9%, and so we left 15% of the money on the table. Well, that's a horrible thing because the client didn't get what they were paying for. We didn't address the system honestly, and by outsourcing, and particularly with a professional like you, Paul, where you would articulate in very great detail what the client is buying and how and when that begins and ends, it becomes then a much more a much more effective tool for an integrator to prosecute the business of integration instead of pretending to be a programmer too or a marketing person too. Yeah. Does that make sense, Tim?
Absolutely, it makes complete sense. And I loved your point about let's make sure that we all understand what we're getting when we go into it, right? And that goes back to not only managing expectations of the client, but also spelling out in detail what I'm doing and what you're doing and what you're paying me and what you're getting.
Yes.
Right. And whether it's 5 o'clock on Friday or it's 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, and then that comes back to the quality and the reputation of the third party person you're dealing with. Again, whether you're talking programming or cable pullers or labor or whatever. That comes back to the integrity and what I've said I'm going to do. And bottom line is, if not just if there's a contract, if I say I'm going to do something, then I'm going to make every effort that I can to get it done. And that's just personal, I guess. So,
Mr.
I think this arena is incredibly important to understand, and dealers that do outsource, contractors that do outsource well. Even manufacturers that outsource well are benefited, and people that do it poorly are potentially financially damaged because they didn't do it well, right?
Yeah. Mr. Tucker, go ahead. Mr. Tucker, let's talk about third-party stuff with you. Not because of it, not for nothing, but George used to work for a control manufacturer, and now he's in live staging and events. Mm-hmm. Two arenas that have seen their fair share of per diem, part-time work, third-party contractors moving through. What are some of the drawbacks and the benefits from where you stand?
Well, the problem is in live staging, it's 90% freelance.
Yeah.
Whether you have a cadre of people who you use on a regular basis, and they're sort of what you call the staff lancers, or perma-lancers, I think is another one that people use at times. But that's most of what we do. We have an in-house staff, but that's mostly shop staff, production management, and then everything else is outsourced from a regular set of people, sometimes from an organization that sources labor. The guy that I work with at ISIS, for the ISIS Vancouver podcasts, works for a company called Rigit. They're a labor sourcing place. So that stuff for live events is essentially what we do. You have to. It's the overhead. There are enormously dips in highs and lows of what our business is and when we get work. I'm lucky. We're pretty consistent here. That's the positive, is that we don't have to worry about a lot of the overhead. But we do have to worry about getting them back. We do have to worry about training them and having them use that somewhere else, or us not being able to use them and them going off and getting a better gig, and using that knowledge that we've invested in them, for someone else. But that's always a good thing. So we have sort of this the betterment of everybody, no matter who it goes to, is better for the industry. We do installs as well, mostly broadcast. And remarkably, a lot of that is 50-50. Our freelancers we've known for a long time and our in-house staff that knows exactly how we have to do it. And that's where we do is that we've built relationships with these third-party people and or companies, and we know what we're getting and we know how to manage that. And we're looking far enough ahead. You mentioned, Paul, the Friday at 5 o'clock thing. We've always made an assessment that if Friday was supposed to be the deadline day and Wednesday we don't think we're going to make it, we extend it. If he leaves and he's got that extra day pay, I'm going to eat that extra day pay, but it was a buffer. Or we negotiate that. If you stay, here's what's going to happen. If you don't, then let's split it down the middle. The guy still makes out. You still get protected. Everybody knows what they're supposed to be up against. And it's sort of that managing expectations and managing what everybody needs. And again, that's the way we do it with these shows. If for some reason a 10-hour day turns into a 20-hour day because of something that happened at the venue or something with a piece of equipment, as the main vendor of that show, I have to eat it. I have to say, guys, we have to keep going. Understand, you're going to get your overtime. I'm going to get into penalty times. We got to move on and do it. You know, or we know ahead of time we're making accommodations. Bring some shop guys in to finish that part. Give them a rest, and then back. You know, I think third parties work a lot. It's sort of, again, what we did with the IO Nest, centralized versus distributed. In this case, we're talking about the same thing. In many cases, you need a core central group, and then you can supplement that with trusted agencies and or people that you know you can use.
Right, because for every outsourced person you bring in, not every, but you know, for every X outsourced people, you're going to need Y project managers to tell them what to do, right? Because your normal staff lancers, they know your systems, they know you know how things plug in, how your power supplies work, and everything like that. Your more union labor guys, the guys that aren't familiar with your systems, they're gonna wait around for you to tell them what to do. A lot of times, they know how to wrap up a mic cable at the end of the night, but which case does it go in? So I think that's really one of the best approaches you could take, George, is having that sort of mix of in-house versus out-house. The risk you take there is you sort of start to build these sort of teams. You know, well, I'm a full-timer and you're not a full-timer, so you know I mean that can happen, but that's sort of this realm of secret knowledge that every AV integration firm or every sound company thinks they own, that they invented, you know, time alignment or that they invented the Phoenix connector. You know, guess what? We all use Phoenix connectors. We've all made tricks. Mid-Atlantic has taken most of our rack tricks and built products out of them. You know, like because we've all shown them, look at this thing I made for your rack, and of course they went and built their own version. And so I think we have to get out of this realm of secret knowledge and stop thinking win-lose. I think a lot of times AV integration firms, you know, there's so much competition between them. Rightfully so, I guess, because of the money aspect. But if they acted a lot more like Silicon Valley or Bay Area folks that were much more open source, look at what we've done, look at this cool thing I made, instead of hiding it in the black box, then we wouldn't have this realm of secret knowledge. And I think that's what we're really getting at here is we all need to be on the same page. It gets back to Infocom, CTS, CTSD. So personally, I would feel much more comfortable outsourcing if I knew that every single person was CTS, for instance. You know, I would feel much more comfortable with that.
And to that end,
just like a Crestron programmer being certified, that's a certain level of competency that you're expecting to get. Now, they're still better, faster, you know, people. But at least it takes some of the risk out, and I think that's what outsourcing does. Is sure you can have varying headroom, but you're also adding risk because you really you don't necessarily know who you're going to get.
Go ahead, George.
Oh no, I was going to say to that same end, I believe CEDIA does something, and so does Infocom. We just did a show on the Apex stuff, where it's conversely the same way. If I'm going to make sure that everybody's CTS or I forget what the CEDIA designation is. Forgive me, Frank. I don't know.
EST.
EST. If I know they are, then I want to make sure as a CTS or an EST that the company I'm working for has a rating that says yes, you're fine too. So it goes both ways. And that secret sauce isn't really so secret as you said.
But I think that the management of an outsource, particularly of a programmer, the best manager is a programmer. If you're going to manage somebody outsourcing that, put somebody on that project that understands code. and understands the intricacies and the the entire arena environment, because it is pretty smoggy for somebody that hasn't immersed themselves in it. You can't see things aren't logical, and so you have a different expectation that, particularly on time, and then that personality type doesn't react well to screaming and ranting and raving, and you kind of got to shield that guy from client frustrations and questions, because they'll react inappropriately to that and maybe change their effectiveness or their efficiencies in the way that they write code. And so our best management of outsourcing on code writers would be a good code writer, and being able to understand that.
All right, guys. Real quickly before I let you go, first of all, Infocom sent out an email this week. If you've ever wanted to present at Infocom, now is your chance. I'll put a link on our website. Knock yourself out. Give them a presentation, or at least shoot them an idea. Say, hey, here's my idea. I've done this in the past, presented my ideas. They've never taken them, but I just probably poorly written proposals. So, but yeah, there you go. I'll put up a link on the website. And this is the final week. I think actually today, unfortunately, is the final week for discounted CEDIA registration. But CEDIA is still coming up fast and furious, the 11th, 12th, and 13th in September in beautiful Denver, Colorado. Frank, real quickly, and one thing I will say is this is my first time going to CEDIA. We discussed it last week. AVNation is going there. We're going to cover it as part of a media outreach. So, what should people expect if they've never been, and what are one or two things that we should be looking for?
It's along the same lines as Infocom, where you have a cadre of contracting types from the most elite to the most generic. You'll have electricians and alarm guys walking around, and then you'll have people that have done some super exotic stuff. And there's some homes out there, believe it or not, that have more money put into it from an electronic perspective than there is in Staples Center.
Oh wow!
So if you're a commercial guy and you're thinking about it, the finish skill level that the typical CD integrator is at is way deeper than what happens in the commercial world. The commercial world has to be a much stabler system. I think that they end up with a lot more integration, and so the expertise on that level is very high. But what makes a really, really successful residential guy is that they have an exceptionally high finish quality, where it's very, very polished and very, because you're dealing with basically luxury women that are looking at your finished products, and so every screw is aligned, and every single piece matches color-wise, and you're dealing with egotistical interior. They call them designers. We call them detonators. There's just a huge focus on extremely high finish quality, and so you'll see that as being at the forefront of it. And then there's an enormous amount of actual science done in room acoustics and speaker design that helps. I would say that the acoustic quality, CEDIA systems have to play really high quality at low levels. And I don't know that we get to that kind of quality level across the spectrum in the commercial world like they do in the residential world. And so there's an enormous amount of education on how to do that, how to tweak and calibrate that. Again, like Infocom, there's hundreds of educational courses, and then there's a ton of manufacturers showing really cool gear.
Yeah. No, I'm very, very excited. So we'll be out there actually on the 10th. I think is a media day. So.
You should go to ISE also, Tim. You should be broadcasting from Amsterdam.
We're trying, dude. That's a conversation that George and I have had. Right? George and I have had a couple different times, and I say this almost every year after Infocom. I'm really hopeful. So I'm really hopeful for 2015 for ISE. But yeah, it's one of those that we've been trying to get to for a while. Problem is that they won't give George or I either one a passport. Something about a no-fly list. I don't know. So. All right, guys, that's going to do it. Paul Konikowski, thank you so much, sir. PKAudiovisual.com. Where can people find you or more about you?
www.pkaudiovisual.com is the best way. That's my blog, and all my contact information is on there.
All right, very good. Thank you so much. Frank White. Frank is as he put it, the senior partner at StayTuned. He's also one of the volunteers at CDS, so thank you, sir.
You got it. My pleasure. If you want to get hold of me, it's frank@staytunedin.com.
Frank at StayTunedin.com. There you go.
Right.
And last but not least, George Tucker. It says AVNation. He's also an engineering coordinator for World Stage and does writing for everybody under the sun.
I do. I'm a whore.
You said that, not me.
I did. I admit it. I have no humility. At Tucker2s, Tucker2s on any social media. Some of my articles are especially showing up right now in Commercial Integrator.
Yeah. This is where I point out that George is the surly one because he's from New York, and I'm the nice Midwestern boy. So, don't follow me. Go by the website if you would, please. AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv. The fine webmasters there have done a fabulous job. I say that because I'm not one of them. They really do a good job with the website. You'll find this program and a ton of other stuff. Something that we've put up here recently, if you're interested in hearing more from us on a regular basis, and you don't do social media, you don't do Twitter or Facebook, we put up a thing for a newsletter because we're going to start sending stuff out about once a month or so, just kind of saying, hey, here's some of the shows that we've done this month. If you're interested, there you go. So yeah, sign up for that if you would, please. There's also AV Social Show, the Live Life, State of Control, EdTech, which is our education-focused show, Pico Projector, DIY, I'm sorry, Pico Prospective and DIY. Do we have a new lighting guy show coming up?
Yes, very soon.
Did I see that? Okay.
Yeah, he just had a baby, so he was off for a little while.
That's a bigger story. He had a baby. There we go.
Yeah. The wife had a baby. He's becoming a brand new papa, so.
That's always fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, go by the website, AVNation.tv. All of our podcasts brought to you by the fine folks at Middle Atlantic. What great systems are built on. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for listening. This has been AV Week.